Hi everybody, I'm Tony Wilson here with my good friend and co-host Adrian, right? And this is
The Supernatural and Beyond.
So in our last segment we were talking about the Book of Enoch and how Adrian has decided to take it upon himself to put together a new series which will be presented on all of our various formats. That's Facebook,
Yes.
that's Instagram,
Yes.
and that's YouTube.
Yes.
There's another format that's opening up to us, but we'll keep you posted on that. Should happen around the latter part of August, maybe early September. I'm in negotiation with the entity, so I'm just giving you a little bit of a sneak peek. So
That's our sneak peek.
behind the scenes, what's going on
Top
here
secret.
at the Supernatural and
And
Beyond.
Beyond.
Okay, we were last talking about the Book of Enoch.
Yes.
And how there's not one book, but there's actually 3 books. And because you're doing this new series, I just want you to kind of just touch on a little bit to kind of give our audience a
Right.
little bit of a preview of what's going on here.
Right. So super excited about this new video series I'm doing. Okay. So it's kind of like personal project we talked about like months ago. But anyways, back to Enoch. So there's 3 books, right? First Enoch. And I'm doing the in-depth study now. We're kind of talking about it here in this video. Then we have second Enoch, okay? And then we have third Enoch. So I believe first Enoch and second Enoch are great texts to read. Third Enoch was written by a rabbi that had like a vision, okay? And he had saw the heavenlies, and he said that he had saw Enoch in heaven, and that Enoch in heaven had been promoted from a human to an angel named, not Megatron like the Transformers, but Megadon or something like that. Metatron. Is that from Transformers?
No, it is Megatron.
Megatron.
In the Transformers, but it's
Uh-huh.
Metatron in ancient scriptural text.
Yeah, Metatron. There's my dyslexia kicking in. But that one was an encounter, and you know, based on what we know in Scripture and based on what we know in First Enoch and Second Enoch, I wouldn't see how Enoch as a human could get promoted to an angel, because like that's part of the whole fall and all the deception from the evil one, from Lucifer. He was jealous because he was an angel and he was number 3 in charge, and then God created mankind, and Lucifer got jealous and he rebelled and he fell from heaven.
Yeah.
So like humans were created, no disrespect to the angels, but we're created above the angels. We're created
I'm
in
so
the
glad
image of God.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I hear it the other way around.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear you say that.
Yeah, so like a lot of people like in our culture, they talk about like, oh, you know, when someone passes, God forbid people pass, but when someone passes, they say, oh, now they're an angel in heaven. It's like, no, we're above the angels. Like the angels, they kind of envy us a little bit. And you know, you have the fallen angels and you have the holy angels that stayed with God. Because 1/3 fell, right?
Right.
So the rabbi that wrote Third Enoch, he had this encounter. He saw this vision. It's interesting stuff, but it wasn't written by Enoch, clearly. First Enoch and Second Enoch, I believe, were written by Enoch himself, and I believe they were passed down from generations. And there's a place in First Enoch where it touches on it, where it said where God called Enoch a scribe, and then in Second Enoch, the second book of Enoch, it was talking about how Enoch was the first scribe. So the first book of Enoch kind of goes into details on, you know, all these stuff like prophecies, the book of parables, how the heavenlies are laid out.
Right,
and then
right,
the
right.
second book of Enoch's a little bit different. It's kind of a different perspective. But second Enoch talks about more like blessings and more like curses. And if you look into the Beatitudes, like Matthew 5, where Jesus gives blessings and curses, like blessed are those who are the peacemakers, for they should be called the children of God. You know, I think that's Matthew 5:8. But Jesus talks about those blessings, and Enoch talked about those blessings. So it was more like Enoch kind of just writing down blessings and writing down kind of what's going on. And First Enoch was I like how it's divided, because it's divided into sections in First Enoch. So like the first section is called the Book of the Watchers.
Book of the exactly.
Which is about the angels, which were called Watchers because they were assigned to watch mankind. They were assigned to help mankind. So Enoch has these encounters. He spends a lot of time with God in his secret place and focusing on God. And he has angelic encounters. And a lot of people in the Christian faith are like, oh no, like angels don't talk to people. But if you look at Ezekiel, angels talk to Ezekiel. Angels talk to Elijah.
Elijah,
right?
Angel
Daniel.
Talk to Mary.
Jesus,
Yeah.
Mary, Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
And then what was it? John's dad. Jesus' cousin, John the Baptist's dad. He remember he went into the temple because it was his duty as the priest, and he had this encounter with an angel. And the angel told him, you're going to have a son and you're going to name him John.
Right.
And he didn't believe the angel. And the angel, made him mute for, 9 months until his son was born. A little bit more, I think, than 9 months until his son was born. And they were like, what do you want to name him? And he wrote down John. And they were like, you can't name him John. There's nobody in the family named John. And then he at that moment was giving back his speech. And he's like, yes, his name will be called John. And so there's a lot of interesting stuff with angels. We're not supposed to worship angels, never that. John in Revelation, he had an encounter with angels, and he didn't worship them. I think Peter had an encounter with angels in Acts. He had a vision for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways,
before you jump off into this next thing, just want to go back just a little bit about.
Yes.
We did a segment on are we alone in the universe?
Yeah.
And the answer to that question is no. We have never been alone.
Right.
Before Adam and Eve, there were all of these, what I call celestial beings.
Yes.
And most people translate that into angels. You know, the seraphim, the cherubims.
Mm-hmm.
Look them up there online. You know,
Right.
it's not hard to find. However, what winds up happening is that there are different classes of angels. The angels that came
Yes.
down and made it with the daughters of men,
Mm-hmm.
they were a class of angels called Watchers.
Okay, yeah.
And again, I don't want to go too deep into this because I don't want to steal any of your thunder. I want you to present this
We'll
in an orderly fashion. But, just right off the bat, cherubims, cherubims, archangels, watchers, these are at least 4 different classes that are specifically spoken about in the scriptures and in these books of Enoch, and there are other books that these angels are talking about.
Right. And that's really interesting, and I like that. And that was how the first part of First Enoch was done, was it talked about the Watchers.
Right.
And it talks about how they entered the daughters of man and bore the giant race, right? Then you have the book of parables, where Enoch talks about parables, and Jesus also talked in parables, Yeshua, right? Then there's another section where it talks about the book of astronomy and the calendar, how everything is laid out, how the stars and the moon and the sun move.
Yeah, Book of the Luminaries. That's
Yeah.
the way that I have it in a couple of my books.
Right, and then you have the book of the visions. That's one of my favorite parts of First Enoch, is the book of the visions, because Enoch has these visions, and he sees from the flood, right, all the way through the time of the Messiah. And then he briefly touches on the end time generations, and the coming of the evil one that's coming, the Antichrist, and all that kind of stuff. But what's interesting is when he sees them, he sees the 12 tribes of Israel, but he sees them as lambs, and then he sees the lamb that was slain. And it's interesting because that's where we get a lot of our figurative speech in the Bible from. It ties back to Enoch in that section of the book of visions. And then Enoch has another section, First Enoch, about the book of warnings and blessings of Enoch. So Enoch again goes into blessings and warnings, like how we should live a holy life, how we should know God, how we should move forward, and about choosing to be righteous and following righteousness, and how God will make a way for us to be righteous, which we later know as the Messiah. Then there's a later edition that was added to it. It's called the Book of Noah. So I believe that this book was written by Noah, and it was just folded in with the Book of Enoch when they wrote Enoch, because it's Noah writing about what happened during the flood. And those parts of the book is really interesting because Noah mentions that he takes sacred text and he puts them on the ark with him.
You know that, and I'm glad you mentioned the ark because this is what it's basically all about. You know, we have 10 generations from Adam to Noah, and from Adam to Enoch, it's 7 generations.
7 generations.
However, there's another key figure here, which is Methuselah. And there's some more information that I'm going to get into a little bit later.
Okay.
But the thing of it is that all of these things happen in a chronological order for a specific reason.
Yes. And if you actually look at the meaning of the names, I don't think we have it here, but this will be another topic for another episode.
Actually, I do have.
Oh, you do have them.
I do have
each of the names. While Tony brings up his notes, I'll give you a little brief preview, a sneak peek, if you will. Those names have an actual meaning, and I forget what they are, but I'm glad Tony has them right
I
here in
have
front
it
of
right
us.
here in front of us. Okay, Adam equals man. Seth equals appointed. Enosh equals mortal. Canaan means sorrow. This other name I'm really hard to pronounce. Michael, the blessed God.
Okay.
Jared shall come down. Enoch equals teachings. Methuselah, his death shall bring. Lamech, the despairing. Noah, rest or comfort. You put that all together, it's man is appointed moral sorrows. The blessed God shall come down teaching. His death shall bring to the despairing and rest and comfort. So even in the names, even in the genealogies, even in those things, you know, like you read all these long lists of generations and it's just like, what's this all about?
Yeah, you read
Well,
them.
names had meaning back then, like even today, but we just don't take it into consideration.
Right, and that's a very good point. That's a very interesting point because the original names were in Hebrew, right? So these are what they mean in Hebrew. And then when you look at those generations, it's very interesting to find out that the whole story of the timeline, the whole summary of the Bible, of the coming Messiah is told in those names.
In those names. And I just want to throw this last thing out there for you. Each of the 10 generations lived an average of around 900 years, some more, some less.
Right.
But you have to take into consideration that Adam was still around
When Enoch was around.
So you could go right to the source and get the information.
And in fact, that's what they said was important about Enoch was he was the first scribe. So in the part about Noah, he took the ancient text and he put the ancient text on the ark that Enoch had written. And Enoch had a chance to talk to Adam because Adam passed, I think Enoch was around 200, 300 years old. I go into it in one of my videos. So you'll be able to find out more details then, but he goes into it and he talks about that. And you know, if that's like your great-great-great-great-grandfather, you always sit there and you tell stories about, hey, when I was your age. So Enoch, right? So Enoch kind of knew like what had happened after the fall. And he wrote that down. And I believe, I'm going to dig it up, I'm going to do more research, but from my research and my beliefs right now, I believe that Enoch wrote, you know, more than just his book Enoch. I believe he wrote the first book and second book of Adam and Eve. Well, the first book for sure. The second book may have been written after the time of Enoch because it goes into a lot of other details, like even after the flood. So Enoch obviously couldn't have written that. But what's interesting with Enoch and what's interesting about what you said is about the names is a lot of these people died before the flood, and Enoch was taken before the flood. And then Noah's father, was it Methuselah or Lamech? Lamech passed just before Noah entered the flood. I think it was like within a year before they entered the flood. So this is a really in-depth study that I'm doing as my little personal project. So I compare the text, I show the text, I highlight it, I add the notes where it links into the Bible. So I just want to encourage you guys here at the Supernatural and Beyond to be sure to follow us on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button, leave a comment subscribe to our channel for more content, and then follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, where we have other content and other videos being loaded. And we'll see you next time at the Supernatural and Beyond.